The Chiefs finally lost.
The Cowboys won, but at what cost?
We had Tuesday football. Melvin broke the law.
And Le'Veon Bell got tossed. Welcome to the Mish Po. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Week 5 edition of the Mish Po. We don't have business to talk about. I received payment and or reached out to all of those that owed me still, and we're all squared away. Almost forgot, actually. Alrighty, as I said, no business to take care of. We're all squared away on the business front. So, on to football. We'll start off with some transactions. First, I traded Chase Claypool and Dearness Johnson to Derek for Deontay Johnson. Well, this one was probably a surprise to everyone, including me. At the time, I felt really bad about the trade based off of Claypool going off for over 40 points. A few days removed, I feel a bit better about it. Both Claypool and Deontay are very talented receivers, and they are on both the same team. So they're in, I guess you could say, direct competition with each other in terms of fantasy. Deontay is currently dealing with an injury, which was part of the reason why Claypool had such a big day. But once he gets back to full strength, I assume both of them will play a good role in the offense. Also, there's Dearness Johnson. He's meh. Overall, I'd say this trade could go either way, but I'd like to think it leaned towards me. Next, and actually finally, because we only had two trades this week. Adam traded Tyler Lockett and Evan Engram to Bruce for OBJ and Robert Tonyan. Lockett has been pretty solid this season, minus the last two games. OBJ has been a bit fluctuant, but he's also a top 10 wide receiver. If I had to pick one of those two, though, I would pick Tyler Lockett because I think he's on a better passing team, and he'll probably, I think, get more work. As for the tight ends, Tonyan is currently a top 5 tight end, while Ingram is around 20. However, Tonyan's stats are probably a bit inflated due to the fact that the Packers are down their top 2 receivers, including Davante Adams. Maybe a bit biased here, but I do like Tonyan for the rest of the season, despite him not getting as much work going forward. Overall, I'd say this trade's probably pretty even, but I think it might favor Bruce in the slightest. All right, game recaps. First up, I've got me versus Fiala. This one was relatively close, and it was pretty much wrapped up with going into the Monday night game. Fiala ended up winning 135.8 to 117.62. Next, we've got Michael versus Derek, two teams that were below 500. This one was higher scoring than the previous matchup, and it also wasn't that close. Derek beat Michael 146.62 to 120.38. At the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we've got a very, very low scoring game and a very close game. Caleb versus State. This game, I believe, came down to Tuesday. Man, could not get much closer than this. State Farm ended up beating Caleb 80.5 to 80.4. Next up, we've got T-Corn versus Colin. This one was somewhat close, and we got a bit of an upset here, I'd say. Colin beat T-Corn 128.06 to 111.36. Next, we've got Sam versus Lincoln. This one was high scoring thanks to one team involved. I believe that this game we've got the highest point total of any team so far this season, and obviously earning himself a beer is Lincoln by beating Sam 191.8 to 111.34. So, wow. Next, we've got Bruce versus Brian. This one is relatively close and relatively low scoring as well. In the end, Bruce ended up beating Brian 110.04 to 97.04. And finally, we've got Macy versus Adam. This one was the second closest matchup of the game, or of the week. It was also relatively low scoring. Final score of this one, Macy won 101.44 to 97.28. Next, we've got the power rankings. Number 14, we've got Caleb. You scored the least amount of points this past week. Just barely, though. 10th of a point different there. Yeah, you guys just didn't really show up. So Caleb at 14. Number 13, we've got Michael. Also pretty decently scoring, right around 100 points, I believe, for you. Yeah, you're really hoping for Michael Thomas to come back. He was supposed to come back, but he punched a guy, so hopefully he can come back for you. Number 12, we've got Derek. You had a pretty solid victory last week, and you are going up against a decent opponent next week, so hopefully you can keep the points rolling. Number 11, we've got Macy. You also had a pretty solid victory last week. Your roster is pretty solid, I'd say. You do have a couple guys, I believe, on a bye this week. I guess maybe not, though, so hopefully you can keep the points rolling. Next, we've got myself at number 10. I took a pretty tough loss to Fiala, but I did score a good amount of points that would have beat, I think, about half the league. So I'm not too ashamed, but I'm hoping for more. So hopefully I can get a dub this week. Number 9, we've got T-Corn. You had a loss to Colin this past week, and it doesn't get much easier going forward for you this upcoming week. So hopefully you can score some more points here. Speaking of Colin, we've got Colin at number 8. You, like I said, beat T-Corn this past week, so good on you for that. And hopefully you can, for your own sake, score some solid points this upcoming week. So, number 7, we've got State. You just narrowly beat Caleb last week. And luckily you played him because he's the only person you would have beat last week. You do go up a pretty solid opponent this upcoming week. So hopefully you can score more than 80.5 points. Next up, we got Sam. You brutally lost to Lincoln, but to be fair, anybody would have. You do, however, have another tough opponent coming up this week. So hopefully you can score some solid points. Number 5, we've got Adam. I thought you had some pretty good chances of winning this upcoming week, but you lost to Macy, and a lot like a lot of people in this league, you have a tough matchup next week, so hopefully you can score some good points. Number 4, we've got Brian. You lost to Bruce, and I mean, like I said about Adam, I wouldn't be too ashamed. He didn't score the most, but he is the only undefeated team left in the league this season. So hopefully you can set a solid lineup and get some good points out of them. Number 3, we've got Fiala. You beat me last week, and you put up some good numbers. You do go up against a pretty decent opponent next week, so let's see if you can keep that up. Number 2, we've got Lincoln. You really skyrocketed in the power rankings lately. You put up the most points last week, beating Sam handedly. But you do go up against a pretty solid opponent this upcoming week. And that leads us to number 1. We've got Bruce. You beat Brian this past week. And much like Lincoln, you're going up against a pretty solid opponent. So let's see if you can keep your scoring and winning ways going. All right. Time for the matchup previews. First up, we've got me versus Colin. Key players for me, we've got Miles Sanders, who put up solid points last week against a tough defense, but he is facing another tough defense this week in Baltimore. So I'm hoping he can do the same thing he did last week. Also for me, we've got Dalton Schultz. He did not do very well last week, and he does have a quarterback change following Dak's injury. So hopefully he can turn things around for me and put out a solid production. Next, we've got Deshaun Watson for Colin. He did pretty solid last week, if I remember correctly. I may not be remembering correctly, but he is going up against a pretty stout defense this week in Tennessee, who was all kinds of trouble for Josh Allen last week. So we'll see how he can do against them. And next we've got Jarvis Landry, who is also going up against a pretty stout defense in Pittsburgh. He is also questionable right now, so we'll see how he can progress into this weekend. For this matchup, I've got myself as the winner. No surprise there. Next up, we've got Michael versus Caleb. Key player for Michael here is Kareem Hunt, who's been going off ever since Nick Chubb got hurt. But much like Jarvis Landry, because they're on the same team, he's going up against a tough Steelers defense, who, besides for that 74-yard run by Miles, held him to, I believe, under 20 yards rushing. So he's also questionable. So we'll see how he can continue into this weekend. Second key player for Michael is Jamison Crowder. He has been doing very well this season so far, so we'll see if he can keep it going this week against a less than great defense. Next, for Caleb, we've got Carson Wentz, who has not been doing very well at all this season, and it's not going to get easier because he's going up against the Baltimore Ravens defense, who just bring to all kinds of trouble. Trust me, I played Joe Burrow against him last week, and it was not fun. Next up for Caleb, we've got Devin Singletary, who did not do super great this past week against a pretty solid defense, and it doesn't get too much easier for him as he goes up against the Chiefs defense, who has been pretty good against the run. So we'll see how we can do. For this one, I've got Michael as my winner. Next, we've got Adam versus Brian. Key player, Adam. We've got Mike Evans, who, despite being a bit banged up the last couple weeks, has still shown that he can produce. He's going up against the tough Packers defense this upcoming week, who locked down Calvin Ridley last time the Packers played. So we'll see how he can do against them. Speaking of the Packers, another key player, Robert Tonyan, who has been going off, as I've mentioned before. So we'll see how he can do against the Buccaneers defense, who has improved since last season. Next, we've got Brian, key player, Melvin Gordon, who, as I mentioned at the top, he got arrested for a DUI. So we'll see if he plays this week. So that's someone to watch out for. Don't want to play him again if he's not playing. And then we've got Justin Jefferson, who's been doing solid. Last week, not so much, but he goes up against an Atlanta Falcons defense who is not the greatest, so we'll see how he can do for you. For this matchup, I've got my winner being Brian. Next, we've got T-Corn versus State Farm. Key player for T-Corn is Chase Edmonds. He's been getting a lot of solid touches lately, and he is going up against a also not as a super great defense in Dallas. Next, we've got Deebo Samuel. He has been not super duper great since his return, and he's also going up against a pretty stout defense in the Rams. So we'll see how those two players can produce for you. For State, we've got Lamar Jackson, who has not been playing quite like himself lately, but he is going up against a pretty not so great defense in the Eagles. And then we've got Devontae Adams, who is one of the best receivers in the league, but has missed the last couple weeks due to injury. We'll see how well he can perform this week, hopefully if he comes coming back. What are you doing out here? All right, and for this matchup, I've got the winner being State Farm. Next up, we've got Sam versus Fiala. Key player for Sam, we've got Ronald Jones, who, much like Mike Evans, is going up against a pretty solid defense, I think. We've also got DJ Chark, who has not been doing super great this year, and he is going up against a less than great defense, and he's also questionable. So we'll see if he plays this week and how he does. Next, for Fiala, we've got Devonta Freeman, who has been doing pretty good in place of Saquon, scoring touchdown last week. And then another running back for your team to watch is Cam Akers, who is going up against a historically good defense in the Niners, but last week they didn't look too great, so we'll see how they can do against the run. For this matchup, I've got my winner being Fiala, and he is my lock pick for this week. Next matchup, we've got a big time showdown between Bruce and Lincoln. Key players for Bruce, we've got Josh Allen, who was pretty stifled against the Titans this past week. So we'll see how he can do this week against the Chiefs, who are also, they're a pretty solid defense as well. Then we've got Kenyon Drake, who has not been playing super great this season, but he does go up against the Dallas defense, who isn't all that great either. For Lincoln, we've got Frank Gore, the assumed starter for the Jets after Le'Veon Bell's release. So see how the old man can run this week. And then also we've got T.Y. Hilton, who did all right last week, but this season has not been doing that great. He is going up against a middle of the pack kind of bad defense in Cincinnati. So we'll see how he can do. And for this matchup, I've got Lincoln as my winner, and he's my upset pick for this week. And finally, we've got Macy versus Derek. Both teams coming off wins this week. Key player for Macy, we've got Raheem Mostert, who has returned from injury, but he's going up against a tough defense in the Rams. So we'll see how he can do. And then we've got Julio Jones, who, speaking of injury, has been out for the last 2 weeks. We'll see if he can play this week, and if he does, he'll be going up against the Minnesota Vikings defense, who has been a bit bad this year, so he could have a chance to really explode. And that just leaves up with Derek, who we've got a pair of receivers for key players to watch. We got Chase Claypool, mentioned earlier, put up 40-some points last week, and we'll see if he can keep that going this week against the Browns. And then we've got Marvin Jones, who has been a bit disappointing this season. Coming off a bye, we'll see if he's going to be a bit rejuvenated and if he can score some points here against Jacksonville. So, for this matchup, I've got my winner being Macy. Woo! So, that'll just about do it, I think, for this week's episode of the Mish Po. As I mentioned last week, if you have any comments or questions or concerns or whatever, shoot them my way. And with that, thank you. And thank you.
Fell off, I'm still hot, knock your shell off. My money stacked fat, plus I can't turn the swell off. The franchise doing big business, I live this, it's automatic. I win this, so you hear those horns, you finished. A soldier, and I stay under you fighting. Plus I'm storming on you chumps like I'm thunder and lightning. Ain't no way you breaking me, kid, I'm harder than nails. Plus I keep it on lock like I'm part of the jail. I'm slaughtering stale competition. I got the whole block wishing they could run with my division, but they gone fishing with no bait. Kid, your boy, hold weight. I got my soul straight. I brush your mouth like Colgate. In any weather, I'm never better. Your boy's so hot, you never catch me in the next man's sweater. If they hate, let them hate. I drop your whole clan. Lay your ass down for the 3-second tan.
Alright, for this flip, we'll go with Adam. Nope.